Today we're going to talk about those Black Vernissage tomato seeds that we started in an earlier video. As you can see, the plants have grown fairly well. I'm going to just talk a little bit about what they've been through up until this point, and then we're going to transplant one of these up into a larger growing container. To begin, when you first get your tomato seeds to sprout, you'll see the initial set of leaves. These aren't true leaves, and if you look closely here, these are still on the plant right here and right here. I believe they're called cotyledons. They're the first to come, but the actual true leaves are these, and notice that they have that more unique tomato leaf, if you haven't seen it before, type of a shape. Generally, as soon as I start seeing some of the true leaves just beginning to sprout on a plant, I'll begin to actually use that hydroponic solution we discussed in an earlier video in my growing tray. And so how you do that is you just would either leave one of these cells empty so you can put water down in that cell, or you can actually just lift this up and you've got a growing tray underneath the growing cells. And if you have one of those sprayers like I showed in a previous video, or just a jug, you can pour in the hydroponic solution or you can spray it in, and that will give the nutrients that your plants need as they're developing. And I've actually found that the hydroponic solution is gentle enough that even a young sprout, like these pepper seeds that are over here, that are still just on those initial leaves and don't yet have any true leaves, isn't generally damaged by having that hydroponic solution soaking up into its growing medium. So I highly recommend doing that. It helps you to have these rich, vibrant seed starts from the beginning. Now we'll talk about potting up these plants. I know that in a lot of the videos where I have shown myself planting something or upsizing my pot, I have said that I've just grown in municipal compost, and that is my standard. That's what I use most of the time. But I know that there are a lot of gardeners that don't have a municipal composting facility near them. They might not have their own compost. So I'm going to also show for this video just growing this out with a standard potting mix. That's what I'm going to use in this video just for the seed giveaway seeds. I'm just scooping it out. So you'll note that the potting mix is extremely dry at this point. If you wanted to pre-moisten, similarly to how we did in that seed starting video where we used the seed starting mix and actually put it into a bowl to pre-moisten it, feel free to do that. That is a great way to do this. Right now, since I'm starting with the dry mix, I will have to saturate it, but we're going to wait until we actually put the tomato in. One thing I'll recommend either way you're doing it is to have part of your mix that you actually haven't put in the cup you're planting in yet. So if you notice, I've got that actually less than halfway full of mix. Let's pull our tomatoes back in, and while I'm going to keep these growing even if I don't use them, I'm probably only going to plant one tomato here today, but let's go ahead and actually thin all of these down to one tomato per cell. Now I will just note that one thing you could do when you're thinning is actually to replant the ones that you're taking out of a cell. You can plant them individually in their own cup and just make sure that you try to preserve the roots as much as possible. There's no need to be overly concerned. If you do want more plants, then you can definitely preserve some of the things that you're otherwise thinning. But for my case, I don't need more of these plants. So I'm just going to do a thorough thinning. When you're thinning, you want to look for the hardiest looking plant. You don't want something that's super leggy, which means it doesn't have much structure. It's been stretching for the light. For example, I don't know. This one here is kind of leggy. See how it flops over? Doesn't have a lot of structure there. If you do end up having leggy seedlings, perhaps you started them in a window without actual grow lights on them or something like that. If you do find, even these are a little leggy. But if you do find that you have leggy seedlings, you can actually just bury the stem, the leggy stem. And a lot of times, the soil will hold them in place, and then they'll sprout roots out of that stem, and you'll still be fine even with a leggy tomato seedling. Tomatoes are forgiving in that manner. But anyhow, let's just keep thinning these down. And while I'm actually pulling out a lot of these by the root, if you're worried about disturbing the roots of the plant that you're actually trying to grow, you can just pinch one of these tomatoes, and if you just pinch it, it'll break right off. And that's not a problem at all to leave that little stem there. Alright, so now we're down to 1 per cell, and even at that I'm only going to be planting 1 up into the next layer. So let's do that. Note that the roots are starting to peek through on the bottom there. And they're reaching down for that hydroponic solution. Even just water they'll reach down for, so. You can just push up if you have a seed cell tray like this. You can also invert thing. Obviously I cut off a little piece of root there. But anyhow, here it is. You see the roots going through. Now, one of the reasons that I had us not fill it the whole way is this will be about the right size for us to be able to fill back in, up the stem to where the leaves are, and still be good. So here we are. Generally speaking, you can transplant up to a bigger growing medium as soon as you've got well-developed true leaves. A lot of people would like you to wait until you have a second set of true leaves to make sure that the plant is resilient enough to survive. Good advice, particularly if you only have a limited number of seedlings. But in this case, this should work fine. So, as we started out saying, this soil is particularly dry. We didn't pre-moisten it before putting it in the cup. So we now have to go ahead and moisten the soil. Now I just am using standard water that I put in this jug. I'm just going to let that water soak in a little bit. And you remember there are holes in the bottom of the inner cup, so it'll soak down. Even if it soaks all the way through and leaves the cup, it's not getting anywhere. And what we're doing is we're slowly getting that very non-saturated soil to have water throughout it. So yeah, if you feel here, it's still pretty dry at the top. And you'll see actually this is starting to float up a little bit in there because the water's collecting at the bottom, and that's fine. Now if you were starting these plants during the late winter in anticipation of growing them inside to the point they're ready to transplant outside, you would now put this back under your grow lights. I am likely going to now take this outside and begin hardening it off under cover so it's in the shade. One thing I talked about in our original seed planting video is that you don't necessarily need to harden off a plant that is just, that hasn't put out its first true leaves. So if you look at these peppers, for example, we could probably actually put these peppers outside in full sun right now because they haven't really adjusted to their growing climate so much. Now, since they are seedlings, it might be wiser just to keep them inside because anything can happen to seedlings outside. But that is an option if you're trying to skip some steps and not have a hardening off period. But anyhow, here I am going to go ahead and harden it off a little bit, and then we'll move it out to full sun. And we'll update you probably a couple weeks down the road when hopefully we'll be able to consider transplanting it. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, now that I've made it pretty moist and there's that water that's collected at the bottom, I'm going to leave that. But I'm not going to water it for a while, and then I'm going to look to see when there's that root peeking out, and then we're going to use the hydroponic solution to bottom water as we discussed in an earlier video. So thank you for tuning in. If you like this video, please remember to hit the like button below. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe for updates on these tomatoes, the peppers there, and many other things that we'll be growing on this channel.